What's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by the shop today. My name's Danny, and today we're going to turn this funky piece of trash into something cool. Check it out. All right, so I've got this unknown species of wood. This is yet another piece from the stack of firewood that I've collected. It, you know, it's fairly hard. It's got some really cool grain patterns in it. I don't know, what you'd call it, but either way, it's got some really cool grain patterns. It's been chewed to death by bugs. I imagine that's ultimately what did this tree in. Was all of the likely beetle activity within this tree. There's some really cool colors within the grain, really cool patterns, like you see all the little undulations and whatnot in the wood here. I think that's going to make for some really cool wood grain. And then just looking at it here, you probably can't pick it up on the camera, but there's some really cool grain patterns in here. So I thought, what better than to pair this with our ice epoxy. I picked this up at Menards. It's relatively inexpensive as far as deep pour epoxy goes. I think I usually spend $80 to $90 at Menards, and of course with Menards you get those rebates, which just means you get to go spend more money. That's how they sucker you into it. We're gonna pour that. Well, first we'll get this thing to fit in here somehow. Probably with the Sawzall, it's probably going to complain a lot, but hey, it's what it's supposed to do. You do what you tell it to. So, I'll get this thing trimmed down to where it'll actually fit in here in a decent way, and then we will get some epoxy mixed up along with some of our pigments. I haven't decided exactly which pigment I'm going to use in this one, but we've got some red, white, black, and blue. Kind of thinking I'm going to lean towards the red on this one, and probably black. I think those two would look awesome in combination with what this has going on. Because I don't know if you guys can see, I'm going to get in here close, but you can actually see some red grain running in through this wood. So I think having a red epoxy along with all these bug holes, I think it's going to look fantastic. So, or at least that's the hope anyway. But we're going to get this thing rolling. I'm going to get this thing sealed up. I'm going to get this thing trimmed down to where it actually fits in this. And then we'll mix up a whole bunch of epoxy and start pouring. See you soon. So I now have this thing all trimmed up, fits in here nicely with lots of room to fit lots of epoxy in there, so we can get plenty of contrast with the epoxy and the wood. I've only done one of these pours, and it was with the colored pencils and the white epoxy. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. What I did in that video, I just used the Varathane paste wax and just coated generously the inside of this thing, and with a little bit of muscling and hammering and sweating and so on, I got the piece to come out. There's probably again, I know there's mold releases and whatnot, but you know what, this worked the last time, so I'm gonna do it again. And all I did the last time was use packing tape, sealed this thing up, went around it multiple times, and I didn't have any leaks, so we're gonna hope no leaks this time too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get all of this stuff sealed up, pasted up, and then I'll start mixing up some epoxy. All right, got all my mixing cups, my pigment powder, a little measuring spoons, keep things consistent, and then my 2-part epoxy. I will be using the little spiral mixers. I've got 2 of them, one for each color. That way I don't cross-contaminate. my colors at all. So I am going to get these things mixed up. This is a 2-to-1 ratio by volume. I think this is by volume or by weight. You can measure by either. So it is 2 parts of A against 2 parts of the B. Or against 1 part of the B. My goodness, I almost messed that up. 2 parts of A, 1 part of B. That's exactly what we need. All right, let's add some pigment. We're definitely gonna try to do a lot of red in this one. Ooh, yeah, look at that. I have high hopes for this. All right, so let's just go with, let's just try half a teaspoon in each one. See where that gets us. Pop some bubbles. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to let these sit. Probably 45 minutes, something like that. I've seen and read and watched YouTube videos, funny enough, that when you're working with epoxy and you're working with multiple colors, it's best to let sorry, it's best to let the epoxy set up for a little bit. That way your colors don't just all blend together and just become blech. So I'm gonna let these sit for probably 45 minutes. Let these things start to set up a little bit, and then I'll get them all poured into the mold with the wood. So I'll be back here in just a little while. So it has been right at an hour. I don't have a temperature gun. I know a lot of times the guys that do a lot of epoxy pours with multiple pigments, they typically use a temperature gun to check and see what temperature everything's at before they pour it. I believe they try to hit like a certain 100 degrees or 105 degrees, something like that, before they pour it in there. This, I'm just kind of letting it sit for an hour. This thing says it has, like a 2-hour working limit. So I'm just going to go with 1 hour, which is, and we're just going to send it. And hopefully the pigments don't mix too much together and just kind of make it all muddy. So hopefully I have mixed up enough so I don't have to suddenly have to mix up some more. But I have a feeling I didn't. Let's go. Float up. Definitely is. So let me get something to push it back down and clamp it, and we'll see how we stack up here. All right, got this scrap piece of plywood. We're just gonna push this down nice and easy. Don't think we're gonna have quite enough wood or quite enough epoxy. Oh, you know what? I don't think I could have made that any better if I had measured. So we're gonna clamp this. This may not have been the right clamp to use. Yeah, let's try a different one. I got these right here. Okay. Well, I mean, it does look like we have good color separation. I do see plenty of black, plenty of red. I think, we've got lots of bubbles that are going to continue coming up. Because remember, this has all kinds of bug holes in it. So it's just going to continue to ooze into those bug holes, and the air bubbles are just going to continue to form. So I'm going to dump out the last little bit of this stuff. It's just going to go to waste anyway, so I'm going to have to clean it up with acetone. So I'm going to get all these things dumped out and then clean it up, and then here in, I would imagine 5 days or so, we'll check back in, and hopefully this thing has hardened up. So I'll see you guys in a few days. Welcome back, guys. It has been 4 days since we poured the epoxy in this. It is rock hard, and It surprisingly, actually, it came out of the mold very easy. It was much easier than the first time that I did this. I used a little bit more of that paste wax, and so far I've been impressed with that method of the paste wax and the PVC pipe. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do just a little bit of trimming on here, just so I have a nice flat surface to work with, and then I'm going to get this thing mounted up. I haven't decided which way I'm going to actually mount this thing up here yet, or which method I'm going to use mounting it up. But I'm going to get this thing figured out, get it mounted up, and then start shaping it. So stay tuned. Now, I wouldn't normally advise wearing gloves, but there's bits of epoxy shrapnel that's blowing off of here. It's starting to hurt. Okay, so I have this thing uh, pretty much shaped the way that I'd like it. There's going to be a little bit of refining still in here. One thing I'm noticing is that I've got a decent amount of tear out, just due to, I think honestly a lot of it is just due to the age of the wood. There's a bit of punkiness in here. You know, it's been sitting outside for who knows how long. Just kind of starting to deteriorate. Got a couple air bubbles in the epoxy that I need to deal with, a couple voids. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of the CA glue and some G-Flex epoxy to fill holes and try to stabilize this wood a little bit. so that way we can get to the sanding portion. I still need to put in the mortise on the bottom here, so that way I can flip it around and put it in the jaws when it's time to hollow it out. But I am going to start with these and get rolling. We are now sanded up to 320 here on the outside. It looks pretty good, to be honest with you. There's a few little scratch marks in it, but I think those are all going to actually come out with the final coat. I think I'm actually going to try an epoxy finish over this. I had bought some lacquer, some spray lacquer in a can, and I was going to utilize that. But the more and more I think about it, I think I'm actually going to try a thin epoxy finish on the outside. That'll seal the wood up nice. It'll bond with the other epoxy that's already part of the piece, and that will allow me to buff it to a nice glossy finish. So I think it's time to flip this thing around and start hollowing it out. It has been about 24 hours and about 5 coats of lacquer later, it looks really nice. But what I'm going to do now is I am actually going to take my micro mesh pads, and I am going to wet sand this thing until we get a nice shine to it. There's a little bit of texture feel, that's just from the spray of the lacquer. So I'm going to sand my way up through the grits with these and get this thing shining real nice.